Well, I don't know where in the world you're watching this from today, but I got to tell you, I'm out in Storm Eunice here, just doing some essential stuff for livestock. And yeah, you take your life in your hands at the moment. There's trees swaying in the wind, and there's lumps of whatever flying around the place here. It's not a good place to be, but stock's got to be watched. The trees around me though, standing up really well to the pressure of the wind blowing. Today they're resilient to the winds that blow. We've got 80-90 mile an hour gusts here today. And it reminds me of Paul, the Apostle Paul, writing to a young man in 2 Timothy 1:5 about his standing up and persevering, persisting in the faith against the pressure that he was having to withstand, just to stay with his faith, really. Pressure on him coming from his home and his culture. The winds were blowing against him and he was standing up. Now Acts 16 verses 1 and 3 tells us that his mother was Jewish and was a believer. And his father was a Greek, not a believer in Jesus at all. And in our multi-ethnic culture, we might want to say, getting windy again, we might want to say, well, what's the problem with that? We might say in an ideal world, it shouldn't be a problem if his mother's a Hebrew and a believer and his father's a Greek. But do you live in an ideal world? I don't. I'm certainly not living in an ideal world today. There's tea and toast coming in a minute, I think, to get out of this lot that's going on here. Timothy was raised in a home that was divided by totally conflicting opinions of how to raise children and of what constituted right and wrong, basic things. How do you raise a child when there's difference about what's right and what's wrong? The Greeks dedicated children to household gods. Different ethics arose out of that Greek culture. It could be quite harsh and cruel for children and for the elderly. So Timothy grew up in a home daily divided over ethics, values and standards, but he had followed the faith, and Paul commends him for that, followed the faith taught him by his mother Eunice, this is Storm Eunice I'm standing in at the moment, and his grandmother Lois, and he stood up against all the pressure that would have pushed a young man the other way, away from his faith and following the Lord Jesus Christ. And in our increasingly pluralistic society, we'll see more of that going on in homes around us. So today, I guess the challenge is to see how you can be a Timothy and stand up to those pressures that are coming against us. How you can encourage a Timothy who's under such pressure, and to pray that God would raise up and strengthen many Timothys for our era the way it is, so that our era can see in them the living portrait of a Christian life.